Good morning, friend. I'm just up early doing my devos today, and I wanted to shoot this quick message out to you. It's not a long one, but I hope it gets your day started right like it has mine. You know, we talk about worship a lot as a church and as God's people, and we talk about what worship is. And unfortunately, we come to a Sunday morning and we sing our songs and we raise our hands, and then we walk out the door and we think that's worship. And yet worship is an ongoing, everyday, participatory issue in our life. It should be happening all the time. But we go and we kind of think we do our hour at church and we're done worshiping. And really that's not real worship. Real worship is being involved with God every day. Not just involved, but putting Him first in everything, every day. And in the midst of that, we're thanking Him. We're asking Him for things, but we're also thanking Him for what He does for us. It's not a dead religion. It is a life-bringing relationship. And that sums up what worship should be, is that life-bringing relationship that we have with God. And that's how we learn to love our neighbors, because God's tremendous love comes to us, and then it flows out from us to our neighbors. And we talk a lot about loving our neighbor, but you can't do that unless you're in love with God. Not truly, because that love that comes from God will overflow in your life outside of the church hour to your neighbors. And I think that's really kind of a key. We talk about being the hands and the feet of Jesus, and we give that a lot of talk in church. But hey, listen, you want to be the hands and the feet of Jesus? Well, what did Jesus' hands and feet look like? Man, they were scarred. They were nail scarred on the cross for you and I. And so when we think about that idea of being the hands and feet of Jesus, well, we've got to get rid of dead religion. We've got to get rid of that kind of stuff. We've got to get more in tune with who God and who Jesus is in our life. And what that means is we can't be the sort of people that look anymore upon dead religion and call it good. We got to get rid of that. Because dead religion really just looks at the outside, right? I'm doing the right things. I'm raising my hands. I'm coming to church. And those are all great things, but those are the outward things, and those are not the heart. You can fake those outward things. In fact, many people do. They get into a rut, sometimes not even on purpose, but they'll get into a rut and they fake those things. And so it's more about that dead, fake religious stuff, and we need to be more about the love of Christ in our life, and not so much about rituals, but very much more about the inward relationship we have, because rituals is what dead religion focuses on. We don't want it to be about that. We want it to be about the vibrant, life-giving love that comes from Christ, that needs to be present in our life all the time. And that's how worship looks. That's how real worship looks. And we don't want to take away from that real worship. That dead, that outward thing that we call worship sometimes, that we get stuck in and that rut, well, it looks at people differently than the love of God looks at people. It looks at their sin, and it measures the size of their sin and the horribleness of their sin, and that's not what a relationship brings us to. A relationship with God that overflows with love to our neighbor, it focuses more on who they are as a person, their value to God, the fact that they were made in the image of God, and He wants to be reconciled with them. It doesn't even look at the size or the shape of their sin. It just says, hey, this is a person that God wants to have a relationship with. And so our worship of God and our love of Him plays a huge part in our life every day, to the point that now I can focus on those folks who really need reconciliation with God. And I can pray earnestly for them, and I can work earnestly for them. In John chapter 14, verse 15, Jesus said this. Jesus said, "If you love me, keep my commands." If you love me, keep my commands. Sounds simple, but I want to ask you a quick question this morning. Which side of the comma do you live on? I think of Bible characters that lived on the wrong side. For instance, if you love me, comma, then keep my commands. I think Jonah, for instance, was one of those people that lived on the keep my commands side of the comma. He grudgingly did what God wanted him to do, but he didn't do it out of his love for God. He thought that if he just kept those commands, that was all he had to do, and so he grudgingly did what God wanted him to do. But the reality is, God says, if you love me, keep my commands. If you live on the if you love me side, then it's so much easier to keep God's commands. When you're in love with God and he's filling your life every day, then you can be a great reconciler or tool of reconciliation with your neighbor, between your neighbor and God. And that's what I want to leave with you this morning. True love leads us to want to follow Jesus' commands, because out of that love, I want to be what Jesus wants me to be. True love leads us to that. My purpose is to love God. And then it becomes very clear and much easier to see how I can love my neighbor. Hey, this morning, think about John 14:15. If you love me, then keep my commands. Are you just a person who's going through the rote structure of keeping the commands of God? Or are you really in love with God, which naturally leads to following those commands in a loving relationship? I hope that's you. Hey, don't be a stranger. I'll see you real soon. Take care.